The Pontiac GTO created the entire muscle car industry in 1964. 10 years later, it was dead. This is the story of how the car that started it all became the victim of its own success. In 1963, Pontiac had a problem. They were selling cars to your grandfather, not your older brother. The average Pontiac buyer was pushing 50, and the division's image was about as exciting as a trip to the DMV. Meanwhile, Chevrolet was cleaning up with the Corvette, and Ford was about to drop the Mustang on an unsuspecting public. Pontiac's engineers knew what they needed: a lightweight car with a big engine that could smoke anything on the street. The problem? General Motors had banned any division from putting engines larger than 330 cubic inches in mid-size cars. Corporate said no racing, no performance wars, no risk. They wanted safe, sensible automobiles that wouldn't get kids killed or attract insurance company lawsuits. But three Pontiac engineers, John DeLorean, Bill Collins, and Russ G., decided corporate didn't need to know everything. They took the mid-size Tempest, a forgettable economy car nobody wanted, and quietly started bolting in 389 cubic-inch V8s from the full-size Bonneville. No permission, no approval, just pure automotive rebellion. They called it the GTO, Gran Turismo Omologato, stealing the name from Ferrari's legendary race car. Ferrari was furious, threatened to sue, called it an insult to Italian racing heritage. Pontiac didn't care. They knew American kids didn't want European sophistication. They wanted tire smoke and quarter-mile times. The first GTO rolled out in 1964 as an option package on the Tempest. Pontiac expected to sell maybe 5,000 units. They needed to sell that many just to get GM's homologation for racing. What actually happened shocked everyone in Detroit. Pontiac moved 32,000 GTOs in the first year, not 5,000. 32,000. Kids were lining up at dealerships with cash in hand. Insurance companies were having panic attacks, and every other manufacturer was scrambling to figure out what the hell just happened. The formula was brutally simple. Take a light car, jam in the biggest engine that fits. Add the bare minimum chrome and comfort. Sell it cheap. The base GTO cost $2,500 and packed 325 horsepower. For another $200, you could get the Tri-Power option, 3 two-barrel carburetors that bumped output to 348 horses. That was Corvette power in a car that cost half as much. But the real genius wasn't the engine, it was the timing. The GTO hit dealerships exactly when the first baby boomers were turning 18 and getting driver's licenses. Suddenly, the largest generation in American history had jobs, disposable income, and access to cars that could do 0 to 60 in under 7 seconds. Every other manufacturer saw those sales numbers and realized they were about to miss the biggest market opportunity since the Model T. By 1966, you couldn't swing a wrench in Detroit without hitting a muscle car program. Chevrolet rushed out the Chevelle SS, Ford countered with the Fairlane GTA. Dodge built the Charger. Plymouth had the Belvedere. American Motors, desperate and broke, created the Rambler Rogue with a floor-mounted stick shift and bucket seats. Even Buick, the brand your dentist drove, dropped a 400 cubic-inch V8 in the Skylark and called it the Grand Sport. The GTO triggered an arms race, and Pontiac was winning. The 1966 GTO is what most guys remember. The perfect balance of style and performance before things got complicated. Coke bottle curves, hidden headlights, and that 389 Tri-Power setup that could run low 14s in the quarter mile with street tires and a decent driver. Pontiac sold nearly 97,000 units that year. The GTO was printing money. But here's where the story gets interesting. Success in the muscle car wars meant constantly escalating the violence. If you had 350 horsepower this year, your competitor showed up next year with 375. So you came back with 400, then they dropped 450. Nobody could back down, because backing down meant losing the war. Pontiac responded by boring and stroking the 389 to 400 cubic inches for 1967. Then they created the Ram Air engine, cold air induction, hotter cam, stronger valve springs, 360 horsepower. Still not enough. For 1968, they bored it to 4.12 inches, stroked it to 3.75, and created the 400 HO with Ram Air 2 heads. Real-world dyno tests showed these engines making closer to 390 horsepower at the flywheel. Not the 366 Pontiac claimed on paper, By 1970, the muscle car war had gone completely insane. The GTO judge rolled out with Ram Air 4 engines pushing 370 advertised horsepower, probably closer to 420 in reality, and could crack the quarter mile in 13 seconds flat. Pontiac even contemplated dropping the 455 Super Duty in the GTO, an engine that would have made well over 500 horsepower. That motor never made production, but the fact they considered it shows how out of control the whole situation had become. Insurance companies were the first casualty. They looked at accident statistics and realized these cars were hospitalizing teenagers at an alarming rate. A 17-year-old kid in 1970 trying to insure a GTO judge was looking at annual premiums that cost more than the car payment. Suddenly, that $2,800 muscle car had a $4,000 insurance bill attached to it. Then, the government stepped in. The Clean Air Act of 1970 didn't ban performance. It just made it economically impossible. Compression ratios dropped from 10.5 to 1 to 8.5 to 1 to meet emission standards. Horsepower evaporated. The 1971 GTO that made 335 horsepower was using the new SAE net measurement instead of gross, meaning it was actually down about 100 horses from the previous year's model. But the real killer was the fuel crisis. When gas prices tripled in 1973 and you couldn't even find premium fuel at any price, nobody wanted a car that got 9 miles per gallon anymore. The GTO went from cultural icon to automotive dinosaur in about 18 months. Pontiac tried to save it. The 1973 GTO became an option package on the Ventura, a rebadged Chevy Nova with a 350 Pontiac V8 making 200 horsepower. Nobody bought it. The name that once meant 3 deuces and 348 horses now represented a smog-strangled economy car with delusions of grandeur. The final GTO rolled off the assembly line in 1974. 10 years after creating the muscle car segment, Pontiac killed the car that started it all. Total production that last year? 7,000 units. They'd sold that many GTOs in a single month during the glory years. Here's the thing though, the GTO didn't really die. It just transformed into what it always was underneath the chrome and the horsepower numbers. It was rebellion. It was 3 engineers who looked at corporate America's rulebook and decided to build something anyway. It was proof that sometimes the best ideas come from ignoring the people in charge and just building what you know is right. Every muscle car that came after the GTO, every Chevelle SS, every Roadrunner, every Boss 429, every car that made your heart race when it rumbled past, exists because John DeLorean and his team broke the rules in 1963. They created a market that didn't exist, proved that performance could be profitable, and forced the entire automotive industry to build cars that made people feel something again. The GTO's real legacy isn't the quarter-mile times or the sales numbers. It's that for one perfect decade, American car companies competed to build the fastest, loudest, most outrageous machines they could imagine. And it all started because 3 guys in Pontiac decided that sometimes you have to break the rules to make something legendary. That's the rise and fall of the GTO, the car that invented muscle cars, triggered an industry-wide arms race, and ultimately destroyed itself by winning too hard. Sometimes the revolution eats its own,